21 hours of face-to-face negotiations in Islamabad, the highest-level direct talks between the United States and Iran since 1979. The Vice President of the United States across the table from Iran's parliamentary speaker and foreign minister, with Pakistan mediating. And then Vance got back on Air Force Two and flew home. The talks between the nations failed after hours of negotiations in Islamabad. Iran and the U.S. could not agree on multiple points, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz and dismantling all nuclear enrichment facilities in Iran.
In just a few hours, the U.S. blockade on the Strait of Hormuz goes into effect. Meanwhile, President Trump making it clear to another adversary, China, about the consequences if they play ball with Iran.
I hear news reports about China giving the shoulder missiles, what's called a shoulder missile, anti-aircraft missile. I doubt they would do that because I have a relationship and I think they wouldn't do that. But maybe they did a little bit at the beginning, but I don't think they would anymore. No. But if we catch them doing that, they get a 50% tariff, which is that's a staggering amount.
Here we go again. Senate Intel Committee Chair Tom Cotton joins us now. Senator, you saw that over the weekend, that China evidently is going to give a missile defense system, possibly, and shoulder man pads over to China. President took action, it seems, directly. That's not going to fly.
Yeah, Brian, I can't confirm or deny that specific report, as the president didn't either. But obviously, we would not tolerate such behavior from the Chinese. And I'm confident, as the president said, they understand that, and that senior officials have made that clear to Chinese counterparts. China really needs to engage here on Iran, a terrorist state trying to close the Strait of Hormuz, because China gets the lion's share of the oil coming out of the Middle East. Now that we've imposed a blockade on the Strait on all ships, if all ships don't get out, China is really the one that's going to face the brunt of the pain.
And that means if China sends a tanker in, they're going to be told, turn around, you can wait here, but you're not going forward. This is a stare down.
Yeah, it's really akin to what we've done with Venezuela for several months. The president's point is very simple to Iran. Either all ships come out or no ships come out. And the United States military can easily impose those conditions on the Strait. And remember, that's where Iran gets the vast majority of its revenue and how it supports its military and its terrorist proxies throughout the region. So this puts them now not just in a military vice, but in an economic vice as well.
With the progress we're making, do you think on some level the administration regrets the ceasefire?
No, I don't think so. I think the president has bent over backwards now, going back 9 years, trying to allow Iran to take very simple, very easy steps of turning over their nuclear materials, shutting down their nuclear infrastructure, stopping their support for terrorism. These are not onerous demands. These are something we expect from any civilized nation.
Right.
And the president's going to continue to try to find a way to meet those demands, but he's going to keep the military and economic pressure on Iran until they do.
They got about 100 launchers left, so they're hiding them, and about 1,000 ballistic missiles left. With this mosaic defense that they have, evidently when Saddam Hussein was taken out in 26 days, they said he had so much power, you can decapitate a regime. They didn't want to be decapitated. Take out the Ayatollah, they have 32 provinces running their own war. Is it possible they don't know how bad things are because they have their own 32 separate supply chains? They have very little communication?
They know how bad things are and they know the risk. It is true that it is hard for Iran's leaders to communicate. As Pete Hegseth said a couple weeks ago, they can't, not only can they not command and control, they can barely communicate. They're afraid that if they turn on their phones, that they may get a bomb dropped on their head. That said, every military line of effort in this campaign is either on time or ahead of schedule. Their missiles, missile launchers, the drones, the Navy, the Air Force. That's the consistent message I hear from my conversations with senior administration officials and from the briefings and the hearings that we get in Congress.
So the Wall Street Journal today has a report that we're looking to take some limited action during the ceasefire. If so, what kind of action do you think that we need to take that wouldn't last another week?
Well, if Iran follows through on its threat this morning to target ports in the region for our friends in places like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates,
including the Red Sea,
obviously, we're not just going to sit back idly and let that happen. We're going to re-engage in part to help protect our troops and our ships in the region and help protect our friends as well.
Stockpiles. Are you concerned about our stockpiles, from interceptors to munitions? We heard about shortages during the Biden years with supplying Ukraine.
I've been concerned about this for years, and I've worked on it for a long time in Congress. It's getting better under the Trump administration. Pete Hegseth and the Deputy Secretary, Steve Feinberg, are working very hard to accelerate production of these interceptors and missiles in places where they're made, like Camden, Arkansas. So it's improving, but we still have a lot to do to gain. I'm not concerned about what it means for the conduct of this operation. I'm more concerned about what it means for the future. That's why we have to do more faster.
Would you like to see another round of talks that lasted 21 hours and didn't yield any results?
Until Iran shows that it's serious about these very simple demands, like turning over its nuclear materials, no longer supporting terrorism, no longer trying to terrorize the Strait of Hormuz, I don't see the talks are making much progress. When they're ready to get serious, perhaps when they felt more economic pain, more military pain, maybe they want to re-engage at that point.
All right, Senator, thanks so much. Good to see you in New York. Good to see you face to face.
Good to be here.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Within hours, Trump announced the next move. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday morning, the blockade took effect. Iran was blockading the Strait. Now America is blockading Iran's blockade, a blockade within a blockade. And this morning, Senator Tom Cotton went on Fox News and explained calmly, clearly, and with the confidence of a man who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee, exactly where this is heading. Cotton's interview with Brian Kilmeade was the most strategically transparent conversation a senior lawmaker has had about this war on television. No cheerleading, no bluster, just a methodical explanation of how America plans to strangle Iran economically while keeping the military option loaded. His core framework: either all ships come out or no ships come out. Trump's position is that Iran cannot selectively allow friendly nations, China, India, Pakistan, through the Strait while blocking Western allies. If Iran won't open the Strait to everyone, America will close it to everyone, including Iran. CENTCOM clarified that the blockade will be enforced on all ships entering or leaving Iranian ports and coastal areas, but will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. So the U.S. isn't blocking the entire strait. It's blocking Iran specifically. Its oil exports, its toll revenues, its ability to monetize the very waterway it shut down. It's a targeted economic chokehold on a country that has already been bombed for 6 weeks. Cotton said it plainly. This puts them not just in a military vice, but in an economic vice as well. The segment played Trump's warning about China supplying shoulder-fired missiles to Iran. If we catch them doing that, they get a 50% tariff. Cotton, bound by classification constraints, said he couldn't confirm or deny that specific report. But he acknowledged the threat and added that the blockade creates additional pressure on China because in 2025, Beijing reportedly purchased more than 80% of Iran's heavily sanctioned oil exports, meeting more than 10% of China's total demand. U.S. intelligence indicates China is preparing to deliver shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile systems known as man-pads to Iran. These systems pose an asymmetric threat to low-flying U.S. military aircraft. The Chinese embassy told CNN that China has never provided weapons to any party to the conflict. The information in question is untrue. Here's what makes this so dangerous. A U.S. blockade of the Strait that prevents Chinese tankers from loading Iranian oil puts Washington on a direct collision course with Beijing. Chinese, Indian, and Pakistani ships have been among the few to transit the Strait under deals with Tehran, meaning Trump's interdiction order could put the U.S. on a collision course with more countries depending on Iran for oil. China's foreign ministry said that blockading the Strait doesn't serve the common interests of the international community. That's diplomatic language for, we are not going to accept this quietly. Trump is scheduled to meet Xi Jinping in Beijing on May 14-15. The blockade and the intelligence about Chinese weapons shipments mean that summit just became one of the most consequential meetings in U.S.-China relations since Nixon went to Beijing. Buried in today's reporting was a warning that should be on every front page. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization warned that a global food crisis could develop if normal traffic doesn't resume through the Strait soon. Substantial proportions of the world's supply of products required for farming, including oil, natural gas, urea, and fertilizers, are choked off from global markets. It's essential for the ceasefire to continue and that vessels can start to move to avoid the problem of food inflation, the FAO's chief economist said. He warned the clock is ticking to avoid a situation that could rival the COVID-19 pandemic's food disruption. The last oil tankers that left the Strait before the war are about to reach their destination. Once those deliveries are completed, the world will have exhausted its supply of pre-war crude and fuel. Governments, companies, and consumers have drawn down 250 million barrels of crude in storage since the war broke out. The world's pre-war oil supply is about to run out. Fertilizer supplies are disrupted. The FAO is warning of a global food crisis. And the response from Washington is to impose a second blockade on top of Iran's existing one. The Fox segment did not mention food security, not once. It mentioned tariffs on China, mine-clearing operations, and NATO freeloading. It did not mention that the farming season is beginning across the northern hemisphere, and the inputs farmers need to grow food are sitting in ships that can't move. When Kilmeade asked whether Iran's decentralized command structure, 32 provinces running semi-autonomous operations, might mean Tehran's leadership doesn't fully grasp the extent of their devastation, Cotton pushed back firmly. They know how bad things are, and they know the risk. As Pete Hegseth said, they can barely communicate. They're afraid if they turn on their phones, they may get a bomb dropped on their head. He then offered his assessment of the Islamabad failure. Until Iran shows that it's serious about these very simple demands, turning over its nuclear materials, no longer supporting terrorism, no longer trying to terrorize the Strait of Hormuz, I don't see the talks are making much progress. His prescription, more pain. When they're ready to get serious, perhaps when they felt more economic pain, more military pain, maybe they want to re-engage. This is the clearest articulation yet of the administration's theory. The ceasefire is a feature, not a bug. The blockade adds economic pressure to military pressure. Eventually, the thinking goes, Iran breaks. The question nobody asked Cotton, what if they don't? What if a regime that has already absorbed 6 weeks of bombing, lost its supreme leader, watched its navy sink, and still refuses to surrender its nuclear program and Strait leverage? What if that regime simply endures? What if the blockade hurts China and India and Japan and South Korea and the Philippines more than it hurts Iran? What if the food crisis materializes before Iran capitulates? Iran's parliamentary speaker, Ghalibaf, posted a picture on X of gas prices near Washington, D.C., with the caption, "Enjoy the current pump figures. With what is being called a blockade, you will soon miss $4 to $5 gasoline." This is a man whose country has been bombed for 45 days, whose military is destroyed, whose leadership has been systematically assassinated, and whose economy is in ruins, taunting the American president about gas prices. And the terrifying thing is, he might be right. CNN's analysis noted that Iran's crude sales of roughly 2 million barrels per day were keeping oil prices somewhat in check. The market's response to Trump's blockade threat was instantaneous. Brent surged 8% to $103 a barrel. Economists warned that the blockade will cause gas prices to rebound, along with diesel and jet fuel, and will send investors out of bonds, lifting yields further, threatening to raise mortgage rates and the cost of borrowing for millions of Americans. The blockade is designed to pressure Iran. It may pressure American consumers even more. The war that was supposed to last 4 to 6 weeks is now on day 45 with no end in sight. The ceasefire is technically still in effect, but functionally meaningless. The U.S. has imposed a blockade. Iran is threatening to resume attacks. Israel is bombing Lebanon with unprecedented intensity, and the Strait is now closed by both sides simultaneously. The Islamabad talks, the first direct U.S.-Iran negotiations since 1979, produced 21 hours of conversation and zero agreement. Trump is now considering resumption of limited military strikes to break the stalemate, according to the Wall Street Journal. The pre-war global oil supply is almost exhausted. The FAO is warning of a food crisis. Gas is climbing again. NATO is being punished for not participating. China may be arming Iran. And the president who said no nuclear weapon, that's 99% of it, is now fighting over who controls a waterway that wasn't even on the original list of war objectives. Cotton was asked if he'd like to see another round of 21-hour talks. His answer, not until Iran gets serious. His prescription for how they get serious, more pain for Iran. More pain for Gulf allies absorbing drone attacks. More pain for American consumers at the pump. More pain for Filipino and Bangladeshi seafarers stranded on ships. More pain for Lebanese families burying 357 people from a single day of strikes. More pain for the global food supply. 45 days. Thousands dead. And the senator who chairs the Intelligence Committee says we haven't applied enough pressure yet. At some point, the question stops being how much pressure and becomes how much can the world absorb before the pressure breaks something that can't be fixed? That question remains unanswered. The blockade begins. The clock keeps running. And somewhere in the Strait of Hormuz, a tanker named Rich Sterry sits drifting off Keshem Island, broadcasting its status as drifting, which may be the most honest description of this entire situation anyone has offered in 45 days.